Welcome. Here we are, super live. I'm super early too. I shouldn't have been live right now, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to actually be live and be with you guys here. Sorry if my face was a little still in the beginning of it, but I'm still learning how to use the new streaming software with YouTube because I don't stream too often on this channel. But if you're new here, my name's Magnus. Welcome to my channel. Consider hitting that like button if you like this topic and you want to talk about it. Welcome, Shenmue community. We've got a lot to talk about. It's been a while, and oh man, this video, we're going to actually break down that recent video by Matt Muscles in his What Happened series about Shenmue 3. They keep on pulling me back into this controversy. Now, I, in the past, have put out videos responding to Shenmue controversy, specifically Shenmue 3 controversy, responding to basically big YouTubers that tend to take advantage of a situation where by bringing up some negative news on a video game, you can get a lot of traction online. It's like controversy creates cash, well, controversy also creates views. So what easier game to bash about quality than Shenmue 3? Because obviously, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, it had huge kind of expectations to do well, and it didn't. So it's a well-known unfortunate failure. But then, in modern times, it had expectations and hopeful expectations of just being enough to just get what you need, right? And get it right. Let me know if my stream is coming in weird. I'm getting a bit rate kind of warning from here that's saying that I'm not streaming at a high enough bit rate. So let me see if I could actually adjust my bit rate for the video. No, I can't adjust my bit rate. So I'm gonna have to stay the way it is and just kind of roll with the flow. So let me know if I have issues and I'll start and stop the stream. Anyway, let's get to the point because you guys are here to watch the Shenmue What Happened video. Now, here's the thing. I have to first start off by pretty much giving respect to Matt Muscles. His What Happened videos are, I believe, excellent. They're geared negative most of the time. That's actually the mindset of what is the perspective of his videos. And Real Jason, I'm telling you why I'm doing this, and I'm going to show you as we're all going to review why I'm doing this in particular. So his videos are specifically negative, which is okay because he tells a story that usually ends tragically. But the story of Shenmue, in particular Shenmue 3 and the Shenmue series, has not ended. There's still talks of Shenmue 4. There's still a Shenmue anime that will be coming out. So to just basically say, Shenmue 3 is a failure, when even in the own video he doesn't say it's a failure, but it just did fine, is hints of you that the story's not fully told. So we're going to actually start off. Now, first of all, let me just give this brief warning. I'm not monetizing this video at all. And that's because I'm going to, and I've never done reaction videos, like pure reaction videos before. And I won't monetize because basically I'm going to show you clips of Matt Muscles' video. And I think it would be unfair to take him down at that point. So yeah, I mean, you could kind of consider this mudslinging. I'm not going to first of all, like I said before, much credit to Matt Muscles. He does an amazing job with his video. So let's begin this brief review. So let me know if you guys can hear the audio. I'm not going to go through the whole video. I'm going to skip around too, so you can just see what I'm talking about.
Tao-san.
Oh, hi, Rio.
In the beginning, he starts making fun of Shenmue to begin with, and I'm just going to skip around when he gets to the first point that I wanted to talk about, because a lot of what he states in his video um, regarding the development and the success and failures of the first Shenmues is completely relevant and true, and I just want to kind of hit the points where it's questionable. So here we go. I'm skipping here.
And being a lifelong fan of Shenmue, Ryan got into contact with Suzuki through some connections he had made within Sony, specifically the man with the knack for hardware architecture, Mark Cerny. The pitch was to utilize Kickstarter as a way to rally the Shenmue fanbase in order to finally make the dream happen, seeing Ryo complete his quest. In an interview...
Now here's a point that I wanted to bring up when it comes to this particular point. The reason that it's so important to so many developers, and Yu Suzuki being a legend in himself, is that so many people were passionate about Shenmue 3 and bringing Shenmue series back because of the story, because of the game itself was unfortunately not given the opportunity many felt that the series, those who fell in love with the series, actually deserved from the legend developer Yu Suzuki. In particular, when you compare the exposure that Shenmue had at the time compared to what Shenmue 1 and 2 and now Shenmue 3 have, it's a world of difference. Shenmue 1 and 2, when originally released, only released for Dreamcast and Xbox. And it really limited the audience that can play it. When PlayStation 2 was the most successful game system for many years, and PlayStation 2 didn't have Shenmue. So that's one of the points on why it's almost like, okay, let's give it a fair shot, because if you release it now, you're more than likely going to get Shenmue released to the masses thanks to distribution changes that have happened in modern era, because now you can digitally release video games and just get it to the masses a lot easier, whereas back then you needed to go retail and buy it, and hopefully they had it in stock.
With Game Informer, Payton detailed what his thought process behind all this was. I was really bothered by the fact that Yu Suzuki had this incredible saga of games he wanted to tell, and how that was seemingly ending with Shenmue 2. I always felt in the back of my mind that if I ever had the opportunity to help Yu Suzuki, I would.
So what does that tell you about the franchise? It's an incredible franchise. So it's just amazing. It's just amazing. But I'm getting distracted with comments, and I'll definitely reply to these comments shortly. But I wanted to jump to another section of the video, and I keep looking at my notes next to me.
Behind Yu Suzuki so he could officially announce the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter, which was kind of extremely weird. I'm not sure if there's been anything quite like that before or since for a massive conglomerate that rakes in billions of dollars in yearly revenue to sort of present, not launch, but present a crowdfunding initiative.
Okay, let's talk about how or why it was insisted to be a Kickstarter launch. Basically, why did we have to use Kickstarter? Why was Kickstarter the avenue that Shenmue had to use? Explained earlier in this video, Yu Suzuki really didn't have much development on much else besides Virtua Fighter 4 and then maybe one oddball title in between Shenmue and the early 2000s and now. And especially when it came to launching Shenmue 3, a lot of fans wanted it. Yu Suzuki wanted it. The problem is publishers did not want to put in the money. Sega couldn't afford it. Sega had to bow out of the console business just to be able to save themselves, among other things, just to be able to save themselves from all the money that they were losing. So they had to actually branch off their franchise, become a third-party developer house, and branch off their franchises to different console makers such as Nintendo and Microsoft to be able to recoup some of that money back. Now you had all this opportunity for Sega to give the money, but they just couldn't afford it. Any other third-party developer would not back it. It's not that they couldn't afford it, but then when you look at the numbers of Shenmue, let's see, a series that cost near $50 million, but didn't make enough in return to recoup the costs, limited fan base because it was only released on 2 consoles, and no thanks. And that makes sense. You can't blame publishers for not wanting to get behind an unproven franchise in the middle of the story, not even in the beginning, but he wanted to continue it. So basically, you want it to be in the middle of the story, you want us to put money behind it? No thanks. And that wouldn't work. What choices did Yu Suzuki have? He didn't have any choice. In fact, he left Sega. He pretty much, it almost seemed like, okay, I can talk about the story in conferences and whatnot, what it could have been, but he was left with almost nothing until he got the opportunity through Kickstarter and say, hey, we can do something here. And you know who else was there? Sony. Why? Because Sony did a survey on their website saying, what games would you like to see us put our money to the most? Like what franchises, what games? And the overwhelming #1 choice was Shenmue. Shenmue just completely dominated the Sony message board. So then Sony was like, okay, it seems like there's some meat here, but it's still unproven. So Sony wasn't fully behind it. They couldn't be, because
the campaign itself asked for $2 million and made it pretty clear that this was a grassroots effort, that only the fans themselves could make this possible. It then proceeded to smash that goal and then some, which of course it did because it's Shenmue, probably the most well-loved franchise that had been left on a cliffhanger ending. Probably one of the most loved franchises left on a cliffhanger ending. When it was all said and done, the campaign more than doubled what it was asking, raising over $6 million and making the Guinness Book of World Records for the most successful video game Kickstarter of...
I'm just pausing right here. This is why I like Matt. Matt does his research. I mean, this video is controversial, but he does his research. He does it. He didn't only say, you know, it failed or it was... He did say the Kickstarter was weird. Which it was, because why was something like that necessary? It shouldn't have been necessary, but it definitely was. But he's also showing you, hey, it was a success. And he did the research to see that it smashed Guinness Book of World Records. And he didn't have to say that it did. But he did. He gave it that credit.
All time. Just as it was concluding, however, a few more details were revealed on how any of this was possible. Former Sony head of third-party relations, Gio Corsi, stated pretty plainly, Sony and PlayStation is definitely a partner in this game, and it's going to be run through third-party production. We're going to help EaseNet get the game done. We're going to be partners on it the whole way, and really excited to see this thing come out in a couple of years. We said the only way this is going to happen is if the fans speak up. We thought Kickstarter was the perfect place to do this. We set a goal of $2 million, and if the fans come in and back it, then absolutely we're going to make this a reality. Now, there's many ways for a publisher or company to support tiny projects, and while Sony listed off things like milestone reviews, submission help, and localization services, it's very much assumed that direct financial support was also one of them, and it's here where things get messy. EaseNet were never equipped to publish a game themselves. I mean,
Now, they go on and on about where the money came from. Now, brief summary, came much from the fans, but also from other publishers. You had Epic Games in it. You had other backers, of course, Shibuya Productions. You had
hadn't even shipped a single product outside of a handful of Japanese mobile games. And Sega, well, they had licensed the Shenmue IP directly to Yu Suzuki, so they weren't much of a factor at all. It's really similar to Streets of Rage 4.
So now I'm going to actually fast forward, because a lot of these are facts that are basically facts of what came of the game. And again, Matt Muscles goes into great detail. When this video is actually uploaded and republished on YouTube, I'm going to leave a link to this video, because he definitely deserves at least credit for all the research that he had to do in this video. However, I'm going to jump into the main event, because I am not going to criticize Matt too much. Again, I'm a fan of his. I don't think he did a bad job, but he's also not a true fan of the Shenmue franchise, according to what I suspect based off of the way he edited the video. But a person that actually speculates themselves to be a fan of Shenmue is Super Eyepatch Wolf, where he put out a video where it was like, I have wasted my life. And quite honestly, in that video, he claims to have been a fan of the first couple games and then disappointed with the third, which in opinion is definitely acceptable. Not everybody liked Shenmue 3, but when you're putting out that opinion on a mostly fact-based video, that's when it gets dangerous, because now you're swaying the audience to think that all of the fans of Shenmue were disappointed, which is not the case. And he cannot be the single sole representative of the Shenmue franchise and what we honestly think of it. That's irresponsible, and unfortunately, that is where we need to answer him back. And that's what I'm doing right now. And you could definitely also check out Oregon Pacifist put out an interesting clapback video at this as well. And this is my version, which I agreed a lot with his comments that he had for the video. And I might be a little bit repeating myself when it comes to that, but we need to get our voices heard when it comes to the opinion of this video. So let's begin. And this one, I'm going to be less skippy because I just want to go straight through Super Eyepatch Wolf, because he needs to know that there's more than just his opinion when it comes to this game. And yeah, Shenmue fans can be brutal, but I don't want to attack him as a person. I just want to show that in this video, for everyone else who's watching, he's not all right.
That were made.
Thank you, Matthew. Almost all the choices they made were wrong. Now, if you've never experienced Shenmue...
You heard that. Almost all the decisions that they made were wrong. That's an opinion. So if it's not clear to you or to anyone else, an opinion is not something that's fact-based and should only be taken based off of circumstances of the person speaking and what their bias is. His bias from the beginning was already anti-Shenmue 3. So by him saying your opinion is wrong, well, you have a bias against Shenmue 3. So should I just take it at face value? Well, let's hear his explanation.
Then I do need to give you a bit of context here. Since the game originally started as a Virtua Fighter RPG, the real-time battles used that game's fighting system as a base, which utilized block, punch, and kick. Through these three buttons, you had endless combinations of inputs that would result in a variety of different attacks and techniques. If you've gone a few rounds with any Virtua Fighter, you'll know how satisfying the fighting system can be, simple to pick up, but hard to master. For no other reason than just wanting to change a core system that was established in the previous two games to be less intimidating for new players, Yu Suzuki or some other madman decided to scrap this system altogether, and in its place was something else, something that was not only unsatisfying but also didn't require an iota of effort to succeed in. We rebuilt Shenmue 3's combat from scratch. It's much more fun to play and much more approachable, even if you don't have much skill.
Okay. There's a lot to break down there, but you saw my look mostly, like, while I'm watching it, like, I'm like, what are you talking about? I had that, like, oh, look. I apologize for that, but it was like, okay. So he says the Shenmue 1 and 2 series had the Virtua Fighter engine. And as we all know, Shenmue originally started off as a Virtua Fighter RPG. And that's why it made sense that Yu Suzuki, you know, who created Virtua Fighter, would use the Virtua Fighter engine in Shenmue. Totally makes sense. What he's not really talking about and what he's not really emphasizing is that the Virtua Fighter engine is a one-on-one combat engine. They had to tweak it for Shenmue, But if you've ever played Shenmue 1 and 2, there's a couple of things that happen in in those fightings. First of all, it was still enjoyable, but it was also difficult. Why? Because that engine was designed to work on one-on-one fighting. So when you had multiple opponents, it was not easy to fight multiple opponents because that engine wasn't designed for quick turnaround, targeting different enemies at a time. It just was a bit clunky to target different enemies. Also, for some odd reason, which wasn't really a Virtual Fighter thing, but that engine, that fighting engine, also to add drama, and this happened especially in Shenmue 2, while you're fighting enemies, the camera would start to rotate and continue to rotate. It even happened in Shenmue 1, but even more so in Shenmue 2. So it would rotate constantly while you're trying to fight your opponents, and at times you can't even see what you're doing or what direction you're trying to face while you're inputting your moves, and it becomes almost to a frustrating level that you might lose simply because you did your move, but because your character is facing a different way, it didn't connect and you might have lost matches. So that in itself was pretty frustrating off of the original fighting engine. So that's one reason why you replace it. Yes, the Virtual Fighter engine is fun, but it doesn't work for a beat 'em up, essentially. They tried to make it work, but it had its flaws. And it was called out even back in the day with all those flaws. So that's one reason. Second reason, and if anyone hears different, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have not seen anywhere where it said that Sega also licensed the fighting engine of Virtual Fighter to Yu Suzuki so that he can use it in Shenmue 3. Sega was here, have all the assets for Shenmue, but the fighting engine is a virtual fighting engine. You need the license to be able to develop that fighting engine in Shenmue 3. They did not have it. And because it's off of a completely new engine, because the gaming engine for Shenmue 1 and 2 was custom made for the Dreamcast. So they had to really, and it was bare bones, so they had to really work on it. So when you have something in Shenmue 3 and you're basically getting what you can possibly use, but really starting from scratch for a lot of it, if you copy paste the Virtual Fighter engine, then that's a different license that Yu Suzuki, though he developed Virtual Fighter, didn't have the license to. So that in itself wasn't effective. Samian is saying there's a game called Urban Reign which uses a Tekken fighting engine and beat 'em up with great success. Good point, and I do believe that it's possible to use a Virtual Fighter engine to a multiple character beat 'em up, right? However, it wasn't in that condition in Shenmue 1 and 2. And then to just copy over and license another franchise, which could have cost them more money, EastNet more money, I don't know how much, why would you do that? Why would you give Sega a higher fee? Because they have to pay licensing fees just to use Shenmue 3. So give them a higher fee just to use another license, it potentially could have cost them a lot more money. So why do that? No. Also, they had to take into consideration, kind of like what this quote says that's slightly blurry. It's much more fun to play and much more approachable, even if you don't have much skill. The point of Shenmue 3 was two. First, and what took priority, is to bring back old fans so that they can continue the series. Yu Suzuki dedicated Shenmue 3 for the fans. But the second thing is that if you can possibly get new players to play Shenmue, you wanted it to be as easy as possible, at least for the fighting engine, to pick up and play. And a clunky, unfinished, expensive Virtual Fighter engine might not have been the best choice. It could have worked, but it might not have been the best choice. They wanted something easier to pick up. Say, Batman Arkham Asylum. Now that Batman was really easy to pick up and play, like ridiculously easy. Shenmue in itself and the fighting engine is a little bit more complex than that. So they made it easier to pick up and play, but not too easy. I can tell you, I've lost my fair share of fights in Shenmue 3. It's not just button mash and you get it. And there are a lot of combinations that you could do, and the fighting is so deep in Shenmue 3. I still can't believe they pulled it all off, and it was satisfying in my opinion. My favorite move, like the elbow assault, first time I hit the elbow assault in Shenmue 3, I was like, boom, and the guy flies away. You're like, there it is. That is Shenmue. Yes, it's different, but it's fun. I had fun playing it. And there was a point in the video where he actually pulled up a controller and he was like holding it and pressing a button, and it would take a day of delay. Like a day of delay. There was some sort of delay. That is something that actually feels natural when I play this version of the game, because it's waiting for button inputs, and if you only input one button, then that's what it's going to do. But because it's multiple button inputs for certain moves, it can't react right away, because then it would be even clunkier when you're trying to pull off special moves. You are not going to do a quarter circle or a half circle and a button, because it doesn't apply in this game. This game was mostly based on button combinations. Since that was designed, it had to add a delay. This is not a glitch. This was purposely done to help with the free flow combat of Shenmue 3. Anyway, let's continue.
We're using some AI elements, so even if you're just randomly pushing buttons, something meaningful will happen. Even if you're randomly pushing buttons, something meaningful will happen. This was such a tone-deaf change to make, because if this game was indeed for the fans, why strip out something that was so fundamental to the experience of the first two Shenmues?
Okay, so combat was so fundamental to the first two Shenmues, and this is something that Oregon Pacifist brought up in his video as well. There weren't many fights in the first Shenmue at all. There was a lot of training, there was a lot of story, there was a lot of mystery, but the concept of fighting and martial arts and the mystery of what happened to Ryo's father was prevalent in the game. Fighting in itself was barely present in the game. Barely. The 70-man fight at the end of Shenmue 1 was like, holy smoke. And even that wasn't really a long match once you've gotten used to the controls in Shenmue. It was mostly the story, the epic saga, the investigations. It was important, but it was one of many modes in Shenmue. QTE mode, adventure mode, fighting mode, all of that encompassed Shenmue. Shenmue's main purpose was fully reactive eyes entertainment. Free, basically open world. That was the idea of Shenmue. Not just fighting. It could have been a beat 'em up if it was just fighting. So there's why fighting in itself was a portion, it was an important portion, but not the overall element. And in Shenmue 2, fighting was much more prevalent. It was much more important. That, don't get me wrong, Shenmue 2, but Shenmue 2 had a fun adventure, QTE moments. It had pretty much everything turned up to the 11th degree. So yes, fighting was more prevalent, but so was everything else, especially the open world exploration. And you're going to tell me that the series was only fighting? If you think that, then what happened, or how did you feel when you made it to the final disc of Shenmue 2, the fourth disc on the Dreamcast, or the end of the DVD on Xbox, or if you got it on Steam, the end portion, and that whole portion had zero fighting? All of it was you and Shenhua walking and talking and dodging trees and picking up sticks in a cave. That in itself is a totally different concept. I did enjoy the fighting in Shenmue 3. I will say this. In fact, I'm going to be a little bit controversial. I enjoy the fighting in Shenmue 3 almost as much as Shenmue 2. The only thing that I'm missing from Shenmue 2 is the throws. If this had, in this engine, the throws, I might like actually Shenmue 3's fighting engine better, because it's the ragdoll physics and just the nature of how the characters behave, and the better brawling system when you're surrounded by multiple enemies but you never lose control of the camera. They fixed it in Shenmue 3, so it wasn't bad. And yes, I enjoyed Shenmue 3's fighting engine. Here we go, let's continue.
Dumbing down a combat system so anyone could play it is very 2009, but this was especially egregious since Suzuki and WiseNet chose not to modernize in many other ways. Interacting with objects, speaking to characters, just doing anything within Shenmue 3's world remained as clunky as ever.
Okay, now the clunkiness when he comes to interacting with objects is a little bit more specific than probably what he's used to with modern games. In many modern games, you approach something, you hit X or A button or whatever button, and you mostly interact with objects. And I'm not picking any game in particular. Shenmue 3 has a lot of specifics to interact with. And though I still would admit, yes, it is clunky because you see the highlighted item. You have to hit the button to zoom in on it, hit it again to interact with it, and it's kind of slow. It was purposely designed that way to be nostalgic for classic gamers. Was it the right decision? That depends on you. For me personally, I did relate to it because it reminded me of the classic Shenmue, but I also feared that it was probably not the right decision for new gamers because they wouldn't have understood why it's so like button just to interact with each item one by one. So yes, I wish he chose differently, but it's my opinion. Many fans or most fans might say that they actually love it or the complete opposite. I don't know. I'm just giving you my opinion, which is the fair thing to do. After he gave such a negative opinion on his, I'm giving you my opinion. It could have been better, but it wasn't bad.
Suzuki then made it very clear that this was an intentional decision to ignore a lot of the advancements and conveniences game design had gone through since 2001. Now, it's true that there are many modern game tropes that are worth ignoring, but not when it comes to simple navigation or item management. To be honest, I don't play many other games. If you say you like Chinese food, you probably mean that you like to eat Chinese food. But what I like is the cooking of the food, not the eating. In most cases in the games industry, the guys who create the games also like playing games. But in my case, I really just love to create. So the way I develop is very different from ordinary game developers. Which is, it's honest of him, I'll give him that. And like, I get what he...
Okay, so he's saying that Yu Suzuki doesn't really play games, he just likes to design games. So you're going to take him at a perspective of he doesn't really know the gaming industry, or saying he doesn't know what it's like to play games. Just because he doesn't fully play video games potentially, like he's not up on Grand Theft Auto or anything like that, doesn't mean that he doesn't understand video games. This man created the polygonal 3D world that most of us live in when it comes to other potential video games. The concept of using humans and using humans as in polygons to represent them as characters was first created in Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter was the first ever video game to have polygonal characters. What happened? After Virtua Fighter, people at Sony saw Virtua Fighter and they decided to say, you know what, let's make the Sony PlayStation prioritize its 3D engine because that's where the future is. So Yu Suzuki single-handedly not only pioneered 3D gaming, but he also partially was responsible for the ideas of the creation of the PlayStation when it comes to the type of rendering that the system would do. Rather than focusing on 2D based engine, it focuses on 3D based engine. Yu Suzuki pioneered that. Yu Suzuki, in his mind, had 3D games in his head since way before it was even possible. The whole concept of for example playing Hang On and going towards the screen as you had the sprite scaling coming up at you, that was because in his idea, and Afterburner, again going towards the screen so sprite scaling could increase, is to have you partake in the world that you're experiencing. Space Harrier, having a gun but shooting monsters that have sprite scaling that get bigger and bigger as they come at you. All of that was pioneered by Yu Suzuki, and there was a reason he was making so much money in arcades, being the the Miyamoto of Sega, they call him, because he was that innovative, and the fact that he took it to the next level with Virtual Fighter was amazing. And then Shenmue in itself, with Shenmue, he created quick time events, which some people love, some people hate, but no one did it better than Yu Suzuki when he created the use of, in fact, QTE, which was created with Shenmue. Sure, there were button prompts for actions in video games since before then, especially with Laserdisc-based games, but he pretty much created the word QTE that we use till this day. He created the open world as we understand it when it comes to interacting with everything, and huge neighborhoods as we understand it to this day. Yes, Grand Theft Auto expanded it, but when you look at immersive functions that you can do in actual video games, that was created by Yu Suzuki. So if you are one like, he's never played Grand Theft Auto, you might say Yu Suzuki damn near created Grand Theft Auto, but lighter, martial arts based with less profanity. So don't tell me that Yu Suzuki doesn't know anything or understand modern video games. If he didn't, and he was the only one working on this, then this would have been a lot bigger of a mess. Of course he plays and understands video games. You're just taking that one word or that one phrase that he might have said and take it out of context. He works on video games most of his life. When you're making them, and the hours it takes to make video games, there's about this much time that you have to play them. Barely any at all. So this is a poor argument.
Saying, but don't you think you should at least keep abreast of some basic things? I mean, like, in the real world, if you see some door and you want to open it, you open it. In the real world, you can touch and move everything. Because I don't play other games, I think it's very natural to interact with everything. The keyword I often use is reality. Shenmue isn't necessarily true to reality, but it is a reality you can trust as if almost real. That's what I consider entertainment.
I see.
Unfortunately.
Okay, so that was the point of Shenmue since the beginning. When he was creating an open world, he wanted to make it immersive and give a player the ability to touch and grab and do anything you wanted. That free mindset. And that was fun because you're pretty much, what player wouldn't want to interact with basically anything and everything they could possibly do in a video game? Designing that is a concept that is damn near impossible to really get 100% right. But Yu Suzuki tried with the original Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2. That was his intention. That is what Shenmue was actually marketed as back then. And even now, when I'm seeing so much interaction and so much detail in Shenmue 3 off of a Kickstarter budget, I am blown away by all the stuff that you could do in Shenmue 3 with the limited budget. Knowing that back in the day, it cost millions of dollars to get anything near this level of detail. So yes, being able to do that was fun. Is it fun now? Yeah. But you have to have the time to develop it with better controls and more money to actually make the interaction a lot more immersive. But again, a lot of this development was made for the fans who paid for it. So they wanted to experience, many of them wanted to experience the Shenmue that was familiar.
Unfortunately, this meant that by most modern standards, much of Shenmue 3's design is archaically outdated, and it pains me to say this, laborious to actually play. What was once a fresh and intriguing experience 18 years ago is now an exercise in frustration, and a lot of that is due to another mechanic they decided to clamp around Ryo's neck. The new stamina bar drains throughout the day, and if you get too low, Ryo can no longer run and performs worse in battles. You know, the battles where something meaningful will always happen. In contrast to the relaxing nature of the earlier games, this meter constantly badgers Ryo to eat, which in turn drains his finances, which in turn artificially extends the game's playtime. While there's evidence to suggest that a stamina meter was intended for Shenmue 2, which would have been a big innovation back then, its inclusion here is not needed and is only a hindrance to the player.
Okay, so he speaks about the actual stamina meter being added to Shenmue and it detracting from the gameplay, and it's only used to elongate the experience. Partially true. Now, the fact that Yu Suzuki put the stamina in there is because there's a lot of complexities when it comes to the way he designed gameplay. Now, those who want to play Shenmue and just want to stream through the story as fast as possible without experiencing everything, you lose a little bit of the details when it comes to the gameplay because you just play through, but you don't experience certain events. You don't experience certain types of purchases like trading in prizes that you earn or like collections for money. That was possible in Shenmue 2, and a lot of people could just skip through that and never experience that. In Shenmue 3, by including the stamina system, it has you slow down because now you have to spend money. And then spending money, of course you can work, and work in the game is meant to be laborious on purpose so that you know, okay, work sucks, kind of like real life. There's got to be some other way to make this money. And then you can experience other games and other attempts to make money, such as gambling. And a lot of the games that you can play are fun, but you experience the fun of gambling and winning tokens or losing tokens. Now, the implementation of tokens in Shenmue 3 was used so that you didn't just earn a lot of money and not experience the other option of using tokens, then going in and trading it for other specific prizes or items. It's so that Yu Suzuki can say, okay, by implementing one system, which is the stamina system, it forces you to earn money. You can earn money by earning tokens. Once you earn tokens, you exchange prizes. Once you get the prizes, you can exchange prizes for money and some energy filling items. It's kind of his direct way of having you experience the Shenmue world rather than just running through it, because a lot of time is put into the design of the Shenmue world. And what's going on, Virtual Bros? Nice to see you. And everyone here, by the way, Starshark Gaming, Samian, Arlara, Oregon, always awesome to have all you guys in here as I'm letting loose on this video. But as I was saying, all of those elements are integral to the actual gameplay, like feeling that it's a complete game. If he didn't do that, there are chances that many new players that would adopt this game wouldn't have really experienced the full Shenmue world as completely as they were kind of forced to. So yes, it's unfortunate that you run out of stamina so quickly, but there's a means to an end because it has you immerse yourself in the world of Shenmue 3 a lot better. So, and I think that was a great way, a distracting way, a great way, and sometimes frustrating because it's something else you got to think about. But when you're so immersed in this game, you're doing all of that stuff. You're playing the game. You're immersed in the game because it's actually fun. You ever think of that? Who knows?
Ryan Patton in the same Eurogamer interview had this to say in regards to Suzuki's vision. "I was really worried how Yu Suzuki was going to be managing the budget of Shenmue 3, and maybe unfairly. He has really done an incredible job building a really big game with a relatively small budget. But again, Yu Suzuki is a visionary and he's very stubborn. He does not want to compromise."
That in itself, the fact that Yu Suzuki didn't want to compromise, and it tells you that he really wanted that open world game, tells you that he busted his behind on this game to get it as immersive and as big as he can possibly make it, with the story elements that would satisfy everyone who put their fair share of money into this game, breaking Guinness Book of World Records to ensure that Shenmue 3 happened. Is it perfect? What do you expect from a game that was budgeted through Kickstarter?
So the story, the main thing that most, if not all, Shenmue fans were anticipating is to finally have the story advance, to finally see Ryo avenge the death of his father, and it just doesn't happen. Suzuki has always planned to make Shenmue a massive epic spanning multiple chapters like a long-running manga, but after 20-some hours spent walking, eating, fighting, talking, and eating again, the credits roll and Ryo's no nearer to completing his quest than when he started, making Shenmue 3 feel like a filler arc. At the end of Shenmue 2, Ryo watches Landy get away, and at the end of Shenmue 3, Ryo watches Landy get away again.
Okay, if anyone was aware of anything that was Shenmue 3 during its development, and those who put money in, and those who have been fans of the franchise since the very beginning, I'm going to tell you this much. You need to know that Shenmue 3 was never planned to be the end of the series. Shenmue 3 did let you fight Landy, though it was pretty one-sided. It did let you fight Landy. Sorry for the spoiler, guys, by the way. And yes, he still gets away, but everybody who was a fan of the franchise knew, and who supported the franchise knew, that it would continue. But there was another reason why Shenmue 3 was not the end of the series. Shenmue 3 was a Kickstarter-funded project. Shenmue 3 had a very limited budget to begin with. Shenmue 3 was for the fans, but Shenmue 3 was supposed to be also a vehicle to launch the Shenmue franchise once again. Because, then let's admit it, and everyone will admit this, we don't want the Shenmue franchise to end in a low-budget Kickstarter that was a okay game compared to, like, if you listen to these guys. We want Shenmue, the end of Shenmue Saga, when we finally get to Landy, or whatever the ending is supposed to be much deeper than that. To be a grand game that is hugely successful and actually had a budget behind it. I said this before in a lot of live streams on my Twitch channel, Personal Magnus at Twitch. I play Shenmue 1 through 3. I've been playing the whole series. I'm up to Shenmue 3. Live Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursday nights at 9 p.m. That's Personal Magnus. So it's twitch.tv/Personal Magnus. Catch me there. Yes, I plugged myself, but this is the whole point. It's about the Shenmue passion. We want the franchise to end in one of the greatest games ever created. And if you had it end in Shenmue 3, then that would have almost been a little bit sour. Like, why did you do that? Why did you have it end in such a low budget kind of way? I was praying as I played this that the game would not, I knew it wouldn't end, but that the game would still continue at a good cliffhanger, because it should. The franchise deserves a lot better than a Kickstarter game. And that was kind of Yu Suzuki's intention too. It's to launch the franchise, not to pretty much end it and call it quits, because you can make revenue. That's what they're in the business with, making money These developers need to make money. Shenmue is not worth it for them unless they can make a profit. Obviously, they want to please the fans, but it's a business. Video game development is all about the profits. Shenmue 3, surprisingly, Yu Suzuki had the mindset of, it may be about the profits, but Shenmue 3 is for the fans. And I've heard talk that Shenmue 4 and so on and so forth is now meant to gain new fans. That's why you have the franchise. This franchise, it didn't just end in Shenmue 3. You have the Shenmue anime, which was not mentioned in this video, that's bringing you back in on the story. That's going to be on Adult Swim. See, those are items that are relevant to this story because it's not a tragedy. It's the launch of something bigger. And that's why you couldn't have that final battle, because we wouldn't want it. That's not what the fans wanted. Although part of me wished that it was a huge game and it ended in Shenmue 3 with a huge multi-billion-dollar budget. It's not what we got, so it's not what we expected. Yeah, so that's that point. And just a theory. Now, this is just a theory that's kind of outside of this video. I don't believe, personally, that the point of Shenmue and Ryo's quest for his revenge, I don't believe the point is to get revenge. I believe the point for Ryo is to learn what revenge could possibly do to you and drive you towards. And Ryo will eventually learn to not seek revenge, but to seek a greater power. That's why I don't think that this whole him and Lan Di never speaks to him, because there's hidden information there. So here we go, continuing on.
And 18 years of waiting, basically for nothing. Speaking of waiting, the game was delayed 3 times, from its original target release date of 2017 to almost 2 years later in November of 2019. Some or all of these delays were probably at Suzuki's behest, whom, as we've seen, likes things to be just so. However, being a full 2 years late was a hard pill to swallow for even the staunchest of Shenmue fans.
No. See, he talked about the delay being hard to swallow. I looked at the delay as a blessing. And I don't know if some people who put the Kickstarter understood this, but I really felt that it was important that the game get delayed. And I did a video, of course, on the whole development of Shenmue 3 that you could check out on this channel if you haven't already. But when Shenmue 3 was announced in 2015, right, for the Kickstarter, Shenmue 3 was promised on that Kickstarter a launch date of December 2017. To have less than 2 years of development for a video game as large as Shenmue terrified me. Because if you had the game launch in less than 2 years, because face it, development didn't start until 2016. It really didn't start at all. So if you had a game start development in 2016 and then launch by 2017, when the original Shenmue 1 and 2 took 5 years of development, and you were saying that we as fans would be disappointed if the game launched, if the game didn't launch at 2017, and that was a hard pill to swallow. Are you kidding me? Heck no. Look, for example, at what happened at Cyberpunk 2077. That game was announced in 2012. That game really didn't begin development until 2016. But what do we have? 4 years later, it was launched. December 2020. Right? I think it was December 2020. And what happened? The game was a flat-out mess. And then fans were saying, you know what? You should have give it more time to roast in that oven before you launched it. That's the point. Games take time to develop, especially in the modern era. And that is why, exactly, Virtual Bros. Everyone said, take your time. We wanted them to take their time. When it was delayed until 2018, when they announced that it would be delayed till 2018, I was like, that's still not enough time. please delay it again. It was not something that we wanted rushed. And they used that time and that delay to get not only for development, but also to get more money. So, and not ask the fans for more money. They were getting publishers to back this franchise in order to make it more successful and get a lot of the things that, quite frankly, there were Kickstarter goals that we as fans didn't reach in the first 30 days, but they were eventually reached. Why? Because a lot of publishers put additional money, so they were able to announce that a lot of features that weren't initially paid for in the Kickstarter were still implemented in the game. So we got something a lot bigger because we were able to delay it to our pleasure, because when it came out in 2019, we knew that they had at least enough time to have a pretty well put together game. Granted, that last delay, because it was originally going to release in August of 2019 before they delayed it till December, that kind of hurt, because it's like, isn't it done yet? But you gotta understand that if it needed more time, it's better that you release the complete game than do a cyberpunk and get your video game made fun of constantly. And Lord knows that Shenmue gets bashed enough by all of these creators that we didn't need that to happen again. But of course, for views, these videos that like we're watching right now can help themselves. And if I will say this, if Super Eyepatch Wolf wasted his life with Shenmue, why is he talking about it again? Just saying. Here we go.
This was also compounded by the fact that Suzuki himself went on record saying that the 6-year-long development of Shenmue 1 would not be repeated. In the previous Shenmue games, I had a bigger team, and because those team members kept bringing new ideas to the game, I had to continually change or correct things. There were many redos. We were doing things again and again and again. For Shenmue 3, I'm more involved directly in the details and all the elements of the game, so there is much less to redo. As a result, the effectiveness of development is much higher than the originals. Well, he was right about one thing for certain there. The team he had working on Shenmue in the late 90s dwarfed the one working on it now. Between 250 and 300 full-time Sega employees contributed to the original games, compared to the 75 EaseNet staffers and roughly 100 others from smaller support studios who supplied assets. There's no doubt that being understaffed had to have been a factor in the game's slow progress, but it wasn't the only one. Unreal 4 was what Yu Suzuki chose to power Shenmue, and while it's certainly a versatile engine, it was still fairly new in 2015, so there was a good chance that many of the staff at EaseNet had zero experience working with it. All of this was the result of an overarching problem. Huge projects like this, full 3D open world adventure RPGs, just aren't suited for crowdfunding.
Okay, so there is a lot that he unpacked there. So he said there was, to summarize, a lot of money, a lot of staff in the original Shenmue, and not so much in the second. He had Unreal Engine, but they probably didn't know how to use it. If you've played Shenmue 3, which he did, if you look at the amount of detail that they have in Shenmue 3, it's amazing. It's still, to me, it's still one of the prettiest games when it comes to the amount of effort and detail that went into that engine. That is just awe-inspiring. That was non-existent in Shenmue 1, Shenmue 2. Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2 were honestly, they were graphically groundbreaking on the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast really was pushed to the limits in Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2. But that large staff had to develop a custom engine that those that looked at the code after they were doing the HD version, they looked at the code of Shenmue 1 and Shenmue 2, mostly Shenmue 1, and it was bare bones. That thing was hanging together by a thread because there was so much going on that could easily break, yet it ran amazingly on the original Dreamcast with few glitches. There were some glitches that were found, but very few. It was pretty much a seamless game because back then You couldn't just release a patch. When you released a game, it was that game, and that's it. So, and Shenmue 2 was a bit more cleaned up because Shenmue 2 was ported to the Xbox. So a lot of that work was done years ago to fix it before it came over to HD re-releases. But you had large teams working on it for a reason, and it took them years, especially collaborating all that detail. What these guys were able to do in 4 years, if they knew nothing about the Unreal Engine at the time, they did one heck of a job. One heck of a job with this engine. And it runs smoothly, and it's amazing. Again, I'm using Cyberpunk 2077 as an example. That game had multiple millions of dollars worth of budget more than Shenmue did. And Shenmue was able to release a pretty complete playable game in roughly the same amount of time, maybe slightly less than that other game. And yeah, that other game may be a lot more complex, maybe, but maybe not. Come on. There's a huge difference. So what these guys were able to do with this engine was amazing. Sure, Cyberpunk 2077 had to develop its own engine too, so that's partially what caused all of the issues. But at the same time, if we're comparing big budget versus small budget was able to create an open world 3D game where Cyberpunk wasn't, on a much smaller budget. So don't tell me, Kickstarter, you can't do a 3D open world game. It was done, it can run, and a major studio couldn't do the same in the same amount of time. Bad argument here. I'm just saying.
Really pull them off and pull them off well, you need hundreds of staff and millions more in funding than what ardent fans could possibly donate. That's why the most successful Kickstarter games are usually smaller in nature, ones that know their limits and don't overpromise either.
No. Smaller Kickstarter games are more successful in nature because A, they might not all start from a part 3, 2, they're a lot quicker to pick up and play, and 3, they're usually offered for a lot cheaper price tag. Shenmue 3 was released at a full price tag, a full $60. Yes, there were certain discounts that happened here and there, but it was a full $60 game. That's why they're able to sell more with these quick little pick up and play 2D games that don't involve much story and it's mostly action. With a much smaller team, of course. And they can sell it cheaper because the development is a lot smaller. Shenmue 3 was made with a purpose, and that purpose was, let's relaunch the Shenmue franchise, and let's give this one to the fans because they paid us. Let's give it right back to them. He didn't get the point.
By scope, features, graphical fidelity, or the amount of machines they appear on. While Ryan Payton's Republic was a good fit to the platform, something like Shenmue, the way Suzuki envisioned it at least, just was not. Oh.
You okay, man?
I'm fine.
That in itself was pretty sad. The fact that Super Eyepatch Wolf is allegedly disappointed and allegedly hurt by the franchise. He didn't get a game that he wanted in his way that was nostalgic for him. So because he wanted things his way, he didn't get what he wanted. And he complains about it. But let's be real here. That video that he put on where he wasted his life with Shenmue, and then jumping on again for another Shenmue video even though he wasted his life, they do this on purpose. He's not the first one to do this. Young Ye did it too, where he made a video bashing Shenmue on all the controversy with Epic Games, and that the fans were angry. Sure, there were some angry fans, but again, there was a purpose. Whenever they bring up this controversy, the purpose is, okay, let's get the views. Let's get the views. I'm a small channel. And I'm doing the opposite. Yeah, I do this for views too. Views are great. But never once, I could have taken the opportunity to bash Shenmue 3 for here to holy hell and say, you know what, I love Shenmue franchise, and I could have made a video thumbnail, Shenmue fan turns on the franchise after Shenmue 3. clickbait, right? And then I just go complain about it. No, there's no reason to complain about a game that had its reasons to be the way it is, and it actually is a fun game. I'm still playing it to this day. Like I said, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I've been playing Shenmue 3, and I'm already nearing the end of that. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard, twitch.tv/personal Magnus. I got to do those plugs to hopefully get more. I'm actually on my Twitch channel. I'm at 41 followers, 9 away from affiliate status, and we've been playing since Shenmue 1, and getting that is tough. So if there's some of you out there that want to put us over that and get us to affiliate status, we can grow that Shenmue group and really take off from there. So thank you if you haven't already, and if you want to catch me. But that in itself is where I'm frustrated on. The fact that there are a lot of YouTubers that just want to take advantage of controversy and bashing the game, and the fact that they're so much larger than a lot of YouTubers who actually defend, support, and love the Shenmue franchise. Though there are plenty that do love it. Adam Korlick, a friend of mine, over 100,000 subscribers, absolutely loves Dreamcast, absolutely loves Shenmue, and was ecstatic when it launched. Myself as well, Oregon Pacifist, Virtua Bros. I mean, these are all creators that do not feel that they need to bash Shenmue when they know enough about the franchise to know it's a good franchise. Let's see what else we got going on here.
Good, because we're not done yet. In the summer of 2017, it was announced that Shenmue now had a publisher, which was none other than Deep Silver, who are trying to calm the tumult from all the displeased backers of Mighty No. 9 just a year before. For many, their involvement with Shenmue raised a lot of red flags a lot of quickly, but since Sony wasn't publishing the game, it left the door wide open for someone who would. Alright, so let's just get to it. Despite having Steam logos on the original marketing materials, and despite the opening of an official Steam page for the game that housed regular updates, Deep Silver announced in 2019 that they had made a deal with Epic to secure Shenmue 3 as an EGS exclusive. Now, this is very much a double-edged sword. Epic gives a fairer split in revenue when compared to Valve, 88-17 versus 70-30. But at the same time, you can't make these types of decisions 2 years after the fact and expect people to be happy that they.
Now, this particular point about the Epic Games controversy, there were a lot of people disappointed in the fact that it was Epic exclusive for a year. And although I personally didn't understand that, because honestly, even like the Shenmue demo was an Epic exclusive, right? If I wanted it on Steam, I just put the shortcut on Steam and I could run it on Steam and add it to my Steam library easily, right? But no, people were passionate, they wanted it on Steam. As long as I get to play it on the PC, my personal opinion, that's all I cared about. And the fact that they were willing to put up not only the engine for the creation of Shenmue 3, but money to back the development, I don't care. Make it run on Unreal's, I mean, not on Ubisoft's thing for I care, which is terrible, but I'll even play it on Ubisoft's interface. As long as I get to play Shenmue 3, I didn't care. But there are those that did care. I cannot discount that there were those that were angry that it was exclusive to Epic Games and they wanted it on Steam. And there was material that said that it would probably launch on Steam and that you would get a Steam code. That didn't happen. But they did the right thing by refunding those that were super mad about it.
Can no longer get the game they donated their money towards for their preferred choice of exe file. Things then only got worse when Deep Silver stated that they wouldn't be able to offer refunds and that if you were unhappy, you could just swap out your non-existent Steam code for a PS4 or EGS one. Well, that was not met with any amount of enthusiasm. The vocal minority made their displeasure very known. After a solid month of that displeasure being made very well known, Epic stepped in and said that they would be covering all the costs from requested refunds so as not.
So this made me angry. The fact that because there was those people that were displeased that they had to log in to double click on this app versus this app, now you're costing them money, hard-earned money that I and many backers put towards the funding of this game. We did not want any money being taken away from Shenmue because of a couple of angry fans that claim to care about Shenmue but are now taking away money from the franchise, leading it to possibly not get a Shenmue 4. That was so disappointing and had me so angry. However, Epic Games did the right thing and they offered refunds, not taking away money from EastNet, though it still raised those concerns on what would possibly happen. And that's what had me a little bit scared and disappointed. But, I mean, the story's written at this point.
Not to drain funding from EaseNet's development budget. That didn't, however, change the actual deal. Shenmue 3 would remain an EGS exclusive for 1 year, which of course has since passed, but it was a black eye for pretty much everyone involved. Less egregious, but still pretty egregious, is that boxed retail versions of Shenmue 3 that were handled by Deep Silver contained exclusive pre-order bonuses, specifically the Blazing Kick Technique Scroll, a unique training outfit, and a Peking Power Starter Pack, whatever that is. These items would not be available to any backers of the Kickstarter who had pledged at any tier level. At least this was never specifically promised to them though, because these items became pre-order retail incentives 2 years after the campaign ended. It was another poor move though on Deep Silver's part. They simply wanted to entice non-backers to buy the retail package, and if backers really wanted it, then they would just need to buy it as a digital add-on.
Why would they do that? To me, it made sense and I had no qualms. Again, there were people who were mad about the fact that they put in the Kickstarter money and then they had to buy it again just to get those special items. And in my opinion, any Kickstarter backer, including myself, was not promised to get that. Yeah, I was promised to get, little capsule toys, I was promised to get a book, a colored book of all the digital art. But I was not promised to get that other stuff. Those bonus items were created so that you can get other new players that weren't a part of the original Kickstarter, an incentive to buy the game and get more money off of them. Why? Because this franchise needed to profit. If you can't prove that this franchise is profitable, they would not, and I repeat, they would not offer it and make it continue to Shenmue 4. You need to be able to sell this franchise. So if you didn't offer it to your Kickstarter backers and they had to buy it, guess what? And the true fans who wanted to buy those special sets to get those other options, that would be even more money from them. But you know what? I know a lot of backers who didn't mind doing that because they wanted those additional items, and that only helped further secure the legacy of Shenmue to give it a chance to have a Shenmue 4. That was the point. This is a business. This is not, let's make a game and just give everybody everything and potentially lose money. If a game sells, let's see, the Kickstarter did over $6 million. After the Slacker backer funding as well, I believe it was at over $7 million of campaign funds. If a game sold at retail and only made $7 million off of a $16 million budget, you would cancel it. You would just cancel it. That's why they needed to earn money in other ways. And that over $7 million, many of those who contributed paid a lot more than $60 for the game. So if you break down all the backers and they just and say they all contributed only 60 bucks for the game, you would have a lot less money. And then this franchise would have gone nowhere. The franchise was successful because of the backing of the Kickstarter backers and these additional bonus sales that they were able to do with these pack-ins for that initial excitement. Without that, rather than just being, not a huge hit, because it wasn't a huge hit, but, basically one of the most successful games that they were able to produce, it would have been less than fine. It would have been a failure, and it was not a failure.
November of 2019, both critics and fans were heavily divided on the end product, as it played exactly like the old games, awkward voice acting and all.
Chobu-chan, what is this thing?
It really did feel like something that skipped 0 beats in its 18 years of hibernation, and some people truly, honestly applauded that.
That's right. This is why I think that Matt does his research. He doesn't know about the Shenmue franchise. Again, he just picked it up and he's doing it. That's why he invited Super Eyepatch Wolf, who did a horrible job at defending himself. But at least he brings in points like, you know what, not everybody was disappointed with it. And he brings in a lot of facts, which, again, for a person who doesn't know about the franchise, I appreciate that he did his research.
There is something to be said about a creative mind so laser focused on what it wants to make that it shuns almost all influences from the outside world. Yeah, that's right, I'm gonna make the game I wanna make. Damn the trends and gimmicks. If I want you to painstakingly put this fucking can of soda in your inventory and then have invasive tiny cutscenes interrupt you when you're just trying to walk through a door, then that's what's gonna happen. But there then should always be a balance to designing things this way, to make your intent shine through without actively inconveniencing the player. And
what's weird though, and you can tell he doesn't understand the franchise, is when you're looking, whenever he says inconveniencing the player, he always shows a shot of searching through like a room, and it shows all the icons where you can like grab and search things. If you know Shenmue, first of all, Shenmue 3, that does not happen all the time. There are specific sections of the game, but it's not happening for the whole game. And when it does happen, it shows you the amount of work in every small detail that the developers did in that very limited budget. So when I was going through these motions, once I got used to the controls, which again, maybe that's why he was irritated, the fact that you got to press the button so many times. But when you see the amount of detail, I was honestly wowed. Like, I could not believe that there was so much work put into this game and so much detail put into Shenmue 3 in that very limited budget. You're telling me that this was done in less time than Shenmue 1 or Shenmue 2? Oh my gosh. Again, I'm still floored, but again, just my opinion.
Given the very mixed response to Shenmue 3, ultimately means Suzuki didn't quite nail that. And honestly, in the end, it was always going to be impossible to please everyone after so many years of waiting and heartbreak. Shenmue 3 was going to disappoint some fans, like him, and there might not be a way to regain that trust again. As for commercial success, while it was a record-breaking Kickstarter, in terms of a standalone product, Shenmue 3 was pretty much a failure at retail, selling only 17,000 copies in Japan in its opening week, and not even charting in North America, although these numbers don't take digital sales into account.
Right there, that's important. It sold 17,000 in Japan, allegedly not charting in North America, but digital sales are not counted. So then what are you saying? Digital sales not being counted. You know how, first of all, in the PC, it was really hard to get this game printed, and a lot of people bought this game via PC digitally. That's why there were so many mad players that couldn't get it on Steam. Then you had PS4. I have my PS4, and I did a video on this. I have my PS4 version because that's what I ordered off the Kickstarter, because it's a full disc in there and it's the whole game. That's the only PS4 disc I own, but if there was no Kickstarter for Shenmue 4, I might have actually bought the digital version, because I've become a gamer that, and there are many gamers like this, that when they buy a game, they'll buy it digitally because then they could just turn on their PlayStation and play it. They don't have to look for the disc. They could just pop it in. There are a lot, especially game collectors, that to them that's blasphemy, and I totally understand that. To this day, I appreciate my copy of the PAL version of Shenmue 2, which is how I first played Shenmue 2. This PAL version was like my go-to for Shenmue 2 up until we were able to download the HD version. So that in itself was important to me, but at this point there's a lot of people that would have digitally downloaded it anyway. So that's unfair to say, it didn't even chart. And yes, 17,000 copies in Japan is amazing.
The CEO of Deep Silver's parent company charitably described the game's performance as fine and a niche product. So take that.
What he didn't tell you in this video, where it was described as fine and a niche product, what they didn't tell you is that Shenmue was during their fiscal year one of the most successful published games that they released that year. And the reason that they were successful is because they published Shenmue. So that's considered fine. Yes, it didn't meet their expectations because they thought it would be huge based off of the initial buzz. Maybe they overstated their expectations, but just because you don't meet expectations doesn't mean that it wasn't successful. And if he said it was fine and it was a niche product, where? Where did he say it was fine and it was a niche product? What conversation? It was their most successful in the year in 2019 when they released it. It was like number 1 or number 2 from the most successful products that they released. But for this video, you have to say fine and niche product to, of course, make it sound negative. Again, that's the point of the video, right?
For what you will. For his part, Suzuki has expressed a desire to make a Shenmue 4, but as of now, there's been nothing concrete announced. Kickstarter can be a wonderful tool for game creators to realize their dreams, but due to a multitude of reasons, it just wasn't the right avenue for Shenmue to have taken. And as of 2021, we're right back where we started, with Ryo Hazuki being no closer to finally achieving his destiny. Mr. Eyepatch, sir, you made an incredible video on Shenmue 3 yourself.
This incredible video that he made, I have wasted my life. It's such a clickbait video that, again, it's just taking advantage of a situation. And now he wasted his life so much, he did it twice. He did it again on this video. What is the point? What is he trying to make? Shenmue gets him enough attention that he should be in multiple videos like the veteran expert talking about the game? It's not perfect. Shenmue 3 is not perfect. But it, in my opinion, is more than I expected Shenmue 3 to be based off of Kickstarter. Much more. I expected one Bailu village and little things here and there, a short story, maybe an hour worth of gameplay, if it would have been like 2 years, just to continue the story and really have a lot of story elements. I did not expect it to be as big as it eventually became. So, yeah, you wasted your life making that video. That's what I'll say.
Basically inspired this episode. Where can people find that?
Well, Mr. McMuscleface, that would be in the description below. Check it out if you want to see more of my stuff, or you can come find me on Twitter at Eyepatch Wolf.
There's his Twitter, at Eyepatch Wolf. If you feel like tweeting him, let him know what you think. let him know what you think of his video and his participation in this video. I'm not trying to go after him. I'm just trying to let him know that he needs to understand that he's not the veteran Shenmue expert. We are. Everyone in this chat, all of you, everyone who watched this video and participated, you guys are the Shenmue experts. I'm just giving a voice to my opinion, but you guys have also done that as well in this chat, and I definitely want to thank you for joining me. Again, there's his Twitter. Let him know how you feel. I want to give credit to again, Samyan111, Virtual Bros, everyone else who participated in the chat, like Oregon Pacifist. I want to thank also those who are watching that didn't participate in the chat but gave me your time tonight. That really means a lot. And also to those who watch it later and hit that subscribe button and the like button to get our opinions out there, which needed to be had. But again, and I will say this, Matt Muscles, you can subscribe to him. He does a lot of hard work, and I consider myself a huge fan of his. Again, I'm not monetizing this video. I can't. My channel's too small. But I wouldn't either, even if it was monetized, because I did use his video, and it was without his permission. I was just reacting to points. So you should definitely give him a watch and a sub too, because again, I believe he puts in a lot of hard work. Super Eyepatch Wolf, on the other hand, I'm sure he works hard too, but taking advantage of a franchise that is really in need of a sequel is unfair. That's just my opinion. But thank you as well to everyone who's watched, and once again, I'm going to plug my Twitch streams for Shenmue. I'll have it tomorrow, Shenmue 3, twitch.tv/personalmagnus at 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm on 3 times a week, and I have been since late last year, playing Shenmue. Join us, and I talk a lot about little hidden details of the game, and sometimes I go off on a tangent on other subjects, but I make connections on the Shenmue franchise. So if you follow me there, we are so close to hitting 50 followers and to get affiliate status. I'm like super excited. If we could get there before the end of Shenmue 3, that would be super awesome. We got to celebrate somehow. But as always, thank you. And if you haven't already, you'd make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. I got to get to work on another game sales episode. That's what this whole thing interrupts.